In today's video, we're going to talk about the gang war between the two outlaw motorcycle clubs, the Hells Angels and the Bandidos, usually called the Nordic Biker War or even the Great Nordic Biker War. More about the war. The Nordic Biker War was a war that lasted from 1994 until 1997, and it represented the battle for supremacy over certain geographical areas between the biker gangs. Unfortunately, the consequences of the war were 9 casualties as well as mass shootings, 74 attempted assassinations, and lots of blood and injuries. It can be considered an international armed conflict since it took place in the capitals of Norway, Finland, and Denmark, while in Sweden, the war took place in Helsingborg. Although the Biker War didn't give an impression of the real war in the true sense of the word, it definitely was a war. Bikers were equipped with heavy artillery including car bombs, grenades, machine guns, and even anti-tank missiles. How it all started. Everything dates back to the late 1960s and early 1970s, when the biker subculture, inspired by the British rocker subculture, appeared in Sweden. Eventually, a few motorcycle clubs were established in that country. Subsequently, in the same manner, the same thing started happening in Denmark, Finland, and lastly Norway. The tension started to build up in the 1980s and 1990s, when a large number of bike clubs accumulated in these countries, resulting in rivalry between them. Of course, their rivalry was based on the battle for control over organized crime. Usually, the bike gangs engaged in criminal activities such as drug trafficking. At first, biker gangs were small local groups, but as time passed, many of them decided to merge with other groups, and it resulted in the making of 2 large rival biker gangs, the Hells Angels and the Bandidos, surrounded by their satellite groups. The Hells Angels were formed first, and they dominated the biker scene for years until other biker groups formed the Bandidos to limit the power of the first gang. We can't overlook the fact that there were 2 Nordic biker wars, so let's distinguish one from the other first. The First Nordic Biker War. Since the Hells Angels had a monopoly over the drug trafficking market for over a decade, some groups opposed that and attempted to change it. 2 clubs joined forces to form the Bullshit Motorcycle Club, whose main idea was to take over the hashish supply in Christiania, Copenhagen. They managed to steal the business from their rivals, but that soon resulted in an armed conflict. The war finished with 1 casualty from the Hells Angels, while 8 members of the Bullshit Club were eliminated. In addition, 2 innocent people also fell victim to the war. The Bullshit Club project was a brave attempt, but an unsuccessful one, since they clearly lost the war and subsequently disbanded. The Second Nordic Biker War. The background. After the First War, the Hells Angels started expanding throughout the Nordic countries, and by the year 1993, besides Sweden, they were present in Norway, Finland, and Denmark. Meanwhile, their rival group was formed in Europe by joint forces of many other smaller biker gangs, and the 2 groups engaged in a few fights before the government demanded a non-aggression pact that all of the sides signed. At the same time, some of the ex-members of the Hells Angels, who were dissatisfied with its leadership, moved to the rival gang. Also, Hells Angels' ex-allies, the Undertakers, also decided to join the Bandidos, and everyone could feel the tension in the air. It was obvious that both groups were getting stronger each day, preparing for something bigger. It was just a matter of time. The Second Nordic Biker War, weaponry and the onset of the war. The process of arming the bike gangs was fascinating. Allegedly, from 1994 to 1997, there were as many as 36 break-ins at Swedish Army and Danish Home Guard depots. During the war period, the government registered a deficit of 16 anti-tank missiles, 10 machine guns, 300 handguns, 67 automatic rifles, 205 rifles of various calibers, hundreds of hand grenades and landmines, as well as 17 kilograms, or 37 pounds, of explosives and detonators. Reportedly, the Bandidos were responsible for the majority of the thefts, while the Hells Angels obtained weapons from Russia, Yugoslavia, and countries from the former Eastern Bloc. The Hells Angels' US-based leadership was very upset watching the Bandidos expand, but still wanted to avoid a war nonetheless. Due to the rising tensions and frequent exchange of fire, the delegations from both sides decided to meet and discuss their issues. Unfortunately, they weren't able to seal the deal, and the war officially started. A series of shootings across Helsingborg followed. In the beginning, it seemed the Hells Angels strategically directed their attacks towards the leadership, while the Bandidos' attacks were random. The central figures of the war were these two gangs, but we have to mention their satellites as well, because they also had an immense impact on the war. The Hells Angels were allied with the Cannonballs, Avengers, Marley, Choppers, Customizers, Overkill, Rebels, Rednecks, Screwdrivers, and Untouchables. On the other side, Bandidos partnered up with Afuset, Bronx, Clan, Morbids, Rabies, and the Undertakers. The president of the Bali MC, a Hells Angels supporter of the club, Juha Noisenen, assassinated the president of the Clan MC, a guy named Kari Korpi. At the time, it was considered an isolated incident, but from this distance, more likely it was an assassination that had something to do with the clan war, because Clan MC is thought to be close to the Bandidos. Conflict escalates. From 1994, it got worse every day, as there were more and more shootings. One of the members of Bandido's satellite group, Morbids, was eliminated in his car in Helsingborg in November 1994. The same month, one Morbid member took the life of his ally in prison for providing information to the police. The following months were no better, as they involved more shootings and even bombs attached to the car of Rebels members. The next month, one more Rebels member was assaulted with iron pipes while he was visiting a restaurant with his girlfriend in February 1995. That incident only showed that the riots will continue throughout that year as well. In April 1995, the vice president of the Cannonball Group was shot and wounded by an Undertaker's member. The same year, in July, Bandidos Sweden president, Michael Lundgren, lost his life after being shot by machine gun while riding a motorcycle. At the end of the year, there were more major incidents like the shooting of the two leading members of the Bronx Club, as well as the massive beating of Hells Angels members by members of the Bandido clan. 1996, the year of further conflict escalation. In January, the Bandidos orchestrated attacks on Hells Angels and their satellites, throwing explosive devices and petrol bombs at their headquarters. The bombings also continued throughout the next month, and they resulted in several badly hurt people from the Overkill clan. During March, 8 bikers were shot in the war-zone countries, and 2 of them did not survive the attacks. Bandidos and Hells Angels also participated in a few drive-bys, inflicting severe injuries to members of both clans. Bandidos Norway president was also badly injured during one of the shootings, while 6 Danish Hells Angels members were sentenced to 53 years imprisonment total, while one of them received a life sentence. Until October 1996, the warring parties continuously exchanged fire, seriously injuring lots of people and taking a few more lives. The war reached its peak on October 6, 1996, when a Bandido member fired a rocket-propelled grenade at 150 attendees of a Hells Angel party, inflicting serious injury to 19 people, severely damaging the building, and taking the lives of 2 people. The year ended in the same degree, with a few armed conflicts in December and the injuring of one of the Bandido members who unexpectedly managed to survive being shot 10 times. 1997, the last year of the war. The year did not start well, and little did it seem that it was going to be the final year of the war. On the contrary, it seemed like it had just started. In January, one member of the Hells Angels was assassinated under mysterious circumstances, and in the following months, the shootings were intensifying. The mitigating circumstance this year was that the police started many operations against the clans, arresting dozens of people, and it was this glimmer of hope that showed the war might be over soon, thanks to police and government actions. Taking out innocent people was something that inflamed public anger and dissatisfaction. and it put a lot of pressure on the government and bikers to stop the war as soon as possible. Additionally, the bikers were exhausted by years of intense warfare and were eager to bury the hatchet. Ultimately, the war ended in the summer of 1997. Afterwards, the crime rate returned to pre-war levels, and the sentencing of 130 people to a total of 240 years in prison, only for crimes committed during the last year of the war, highlights the devastating impact of it. The judicial process was very long and exhausting due to a lack of evidence and other factors, but it finally ended in December 2015. That's it for today's video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to leave a like and comment on this video. Also, don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you like what we're doing and want us to continue with more cool content. Until the next time.